All right. Well, thanks everyone, whoever might be chiming in and listening in for today's podcast. I am going to be talking with Kara Redman. Kara is the founder and lead strategist at Backroom, and I have known Kara for, gosh, can we say 20 years? Has it been 20 years? Probably
Probably
pretty
not that long,
close.
probably like 12 to 14, I think, because I
All
think
right.
you
Well,
before I started, like right before I started Backroom, and we're 11 this year.
yeah. All right. So, yeah, probably 13, 14. Feels like forever.
I know.
And what's great though is to be talking with you in this format, which is very loose format for a podcast. But I just always have enjoyed our conversations because they follow the same kind of line of thinking, which is, it's a wild ride, and there is no formula, and nothing stays the same, and it's all messy people stuff. And so I would love to, just dive in and hear a little bit more about what you've been up to this last year, because there have been a lot of changes in your focus for the agency, for yourself, for your brand, what you've been doing on LinkedIn and growing your audience. So it's kind of give me some sort of summary of like what this last wild year has been like for you and
Yeah,
where
sure.
you've seen success.
It's hard to summarize this crazy year we've been in, but I'm going to do my best. So I originally started my company as, brand strategy and identity agency, and we've grown and expanded and tried things and pushed up against boundaries in dozens of ways, and have really come back to the core of loving brand strategy and wanting to do the work. I think that what you and I share and why we've stayed so connected is we like to try things and believe that our work and ourselves as humans doing that work can be multifaceted, right? There's ways to pull in, for example, your artwork into the strategy that you do, and you have this really beautiful, multifaceted brand of like, here's all the things I like to do and create. And I think that uh, tendency toward curiosity and the desire for creation can lead to things that you didn't imagine. I think a lot of founders, and I know this was my experience, have this sort of you look for mentors and there's this formulaic approach, and like you buy baseline selling, right? And there's all these things that you're supposed to do as a leader, like grow or die. And I think that the more I've grown and the more people ask me for advice, I realize I don't really have any. It's more right about kind of tuning into what you need in that moment and how your work is checking boxes for you in ways that also serves other people. So over the past year, it's really like the team size and scale has changed. And as some folks have left, we've reevaluated, like, do we need to rehire for that? Are we actually like bringing in the right clients and the things that we want to do, which have been the ones that had the rub? Um, but I've been really fortunate to be able to rely on my following with my personal brand on LinkedIn to bring in people who believe in my ethos, not just the work product that we do. So I'm
Yeah.
just along for the ride and showing up for whatever happens. And it's been a fun one.
It feels like and tell me if I'm wrong here, but with all of the sort of work you've done to really get your own personal brand and voice and beliefs and ideas and creativity out there around brand and marketing, but also around these networks and communities and relationships. Has that yielded more rewarding work in terms of the things that you get to do and the people you get to do them with? Do you feel like because you've gotten past some of that formulaic, like, here's what we sell, here's how we sell it, here are the services we offer, is that opening doors for you in unexpected ways?
Incredibly unexpected ways. And it's not just the clients we bring in, it's the partners that we found. Like, I've gotten beautiful brand partnerships. I have people that I've met offline. I have a group of content creators that we're planning trips right now to go and like record content together. I've been able to forge relationships that are really interesting. And when you talk about the work that I've done to build that brand, it's like, of course, there's tactical work to create content and all of that. But I think the work has been more self work, because it's, when you're pulling away from the things that you feel like you should write about or what you're supposed to do on a professional platform, like, let's talk about the benefits and like case studies. And when you start to pull away from that and go, this is actually something that I feel and is personal to me, and I'm going to put it out there and see if other people resonate with that. You get a lot of shit, right? You get a lot of people who are coming in and want to tear you down. but
Oh, yeah.
there's something about like creating in public is almost like a therapy. And you learn about yourself and you're like, wait a minute, why did this random comment from Bob Smith make me feel some sort of way? And, I'm out here building. And so there's a lot of, I think, self-reflection and work that has gone into it, but it certainly has opened doors because I think that the more you're able to share the things that you actually feel and are passionate with, even if it's a very small subset of people that see that and go, yeah, like I didn't know how to put that into words and I feel that too. You start to connect those people in all facets, whether clients, partners, employees, colleagues, and you start to create this like little acorn of people who will build with you and create with you. And that's what I didn't know I was looking for until I found it.
That's great. And I also just wanna take a minute to say, congratulations to you just being a powerhouse out there as a woman in this line of work and in this industry, um, and putting yourself and your ideas out there and making great fun of the trolls that show up, of which, what, 99% of them are men. Just they're I love what you do. You just annihilate them in your comments, and rebukes, which is hysterical, but also like, go away, trolls. Like, go back to your basements. Stop being so obviously threatened by a woman in this space. But anyway,
They're
I
telling
love
on
the.
themselves, right?
What's that?
They're telling on themselves. Like those of us who understand a little bit of the psychology behind it, it's like if someone that you don't know on the internet made you feel so angry, you felt like you needed to voice it in the comments, that's not on me.
It's a cry for help, and I hope their mothers see it. But, in the meantime, I know that's taken some bravery and thick skin, and you've always had that. But what advice would you give to someone, especially a woman, a young woman who wants to get into this industry, which has become, so disrupted by AI and so threatening from like the bro culture and the tech bros, and it's just not a very hospitable or welcoming environment if from a lot of viewpoints. And how is a young person, especially a woman, supposed to kind of get their foot in the door and get the experience and exposure that they need, when it's not the world it was 15 years ago?
I think advice is tough because everybody has their own unique thing. There's definitely, like I said, the self work piece is, am I afraid to put this out there because it is vague enough that it could be loosely interpreted as something that I don't intend. Those are the things that I'm like, oh, I'm not going to post it, right? If it could easily get twisted, I don't want to do it. Or is it something that feels vulnerable and I just don't want to deal with the backlash today? And I think just the same kind of mentality of like, I really want to wear something cute today, but I also just don't want to deal with the street talk. So I'm going to put my sweats on. Like we all have those days, right? Just as females. But I think, understanding that the internet is the internet, it's going to be what it's going to be, and being open and receptive to that, understanding it's okay to take a break, limiting the access. Like people, I think the more we present ourselves, particularly with vertical video being so popular, people feel like they know you because they followed you and they feel some sort of a connection, and recognizing that people are going to feel like, oh, there's Kara, I know her. And like they feel like they're your friend, even though you've never interacted. You get to control that access and what people have to you. People don't know me. I don't talk about my family. I don't talk about my house life. Like, so just understanding that you get to control what you put out there, expect the trolls. And I'll say that a friend of mine that actually met through LinkedIn, he has the same people who troll me, troll him. And I was like, oh, you're a boy. And this is happening
Aw.
to you too. This is wonderful. Gender equality. Yay. So I think there's just people who are angry and they're just not for you.
Right, right. What about, I mean, I feel like with AI in particular, like those entry level jobs, those ways that you kind of got your foot in the door in the past are those roles are getting kind of eaten up, because they're just not required anymore because there are enough tools that are affordable enough to do a decent enough job that, I really wonder, like, gosh, where do you start? And my only advice is that you kind of just have to get a lot braver, a lot faster. And one of the things I mean, I tell this to people who have been doing it for 15, 20 years and should feel comfortable considering themselves experts, but no one is going to show up on like day 2 or year 2 or year 5 and say, "Okay, you now have the authority to put your opinions out there and be considered an expert." No one is going to show up and give you that. So you have to take that for yourself. So even if you're new, you're just starting out, if you have opinions, if you have something that you're passionate about, like, go ahead and put it out there. Even if somebody wants to fight you about it, that's great. That's great if somebody wants to argue with you, but you can't kind of just sit back and wait to feel like you've gotten to the place where you can start having opinions and having a perspective. I think I learned that early on, just being in art school. Uh, there was no way around it. But in the world of marketing or brand or design, um, you know, do your study your heroes and have your opinions and constantly feed yourself and be willing to change your mind. Never stop growing and learning. But I think that if you sit back and kind of wait till you feel like you've earned it, you're going to wait too long.
Or if you wait until you're perfect, right? And you
Well,
have
that
this finite thing. And I think like that's a mentality of, am I doing something because I need to always be right and perfect? Or am I doing something because I want to be more visible and be part of a community? Right. And I think like you brought up a great point, being able to change your mind and being passionate about things is incredibly important. But even if you don't know what you're passionate about yet, a great way to sort of shape your viewpoint is to put raw ideas out there, raw thoughts, and see that feedback and help it use that to shape your opinions in the future. Like you don't have to feel like, because I remember I would come, I'm like, I don't really know what to talk about. I don't really know what I have. And I'm like, I've been doing this for 15 years and I felt like I didn't have a voice. And the best way to develop your voice is just to start talking. And I think this idea of being able to live out loud a little bit and not worry so much if people come and counter you and say that you're wrong. I mean, there's people doing things and there's people criticizing people doing things.
yeah.
And the people who are doing things aren't looking adjacent at other people and going like, that's wrong and cutting things apart because they're in it and they know what it's like. Right. And so I think really understanding who your audience is, like, are you doing this to make everyone happy and be popular? Or are you doing this to find the right people and actually be part of an ecosystem? And that mentality, I think, saves a lot of headache and hardship as you go through the process.
Totally agree. Um, what do you what do you think is going to happen with all of this AI disruption in terms of, even just to the quality of the work that's being done, the amount of noise that generative AI is able to put out there, whether it's content or visuals or whatever. It just seems like we are going to get an ever increasing sort of tsunami level amount of pretty homogenized, uh, regurgitated stuff that, if anything, it seems like it might be a really opportune time for people to lean in on their individual voice and their unique, quirky perspective, because that's going to, I think, stand in stark comparison to the volume of AI generated stuff that we're going to see.
I agree. And I really liken it back to the 2010 when it was content was king, was everything all the bro stuffs we're talking about, and everybody had a blog. And then you had like highly regulated organizations like banks and law firms were purchasing blog posts, and so the same blog post would be everywhere.
Right.
So we've always had, like, since content has been around, there has been a digital landfill of absolute shit. And I think we're going to have really great content that comes out of AI, and we're going to have really shit content that comes from a human. And I think the reverse is true. And so I think as much as we can continue to look at tools as the ability to produce more quality things, as humans we're always going to be able to look at quality, right? And if we're thinking about outcomes, particularly in the marketing world and the brand strategy world, like, yeah, you can go and write me a list of community guidelines using chat gpt in less than 5 minutes, but if I look at it and it doesn't have any real world application to what I'm doing with this particular brand or client, then it's useless to me, right? It's just a set of guidelines. And I think it, for us at Backroom, and the way I know you and I both work, is you can either show up to work and go through a list of activities and not really care about the impact of them, or you can come to work and think about what outcome you need to have. And I think that the way we use AI towards that is going to be the telltale sign. I see a lot of people right now are scrambling like, oh, I can't use M dashes anymore because it's like everyone thinks it's like the telltale sign for AI. And I'm like, you're not taking my M dashes, number one. Like my mother was a really good grammar teacher. I use the M dash. And I think it's how do we continue to look for quality regardless of who created that piece of content? That's what's going to be more important.
Yeah, so, it makes me think a lot about, storytelling, the importance of stories. I remember, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, it was like you couldn't even use the word storytelling. That was too much of a buzzword. But it really strikes me today because that is one thing that AI does not have. It doesn't have its own unique story. I mean, that is a big differentiator. Um, it's a great collaborator and editor and helper, in a lot of ways, but it does not have kind of the essence of a story in the way it thinks about things and the way that it can connect. Um, and as humans, I think that's such a core aspect of what makes us unique and what we use to connect with people, with other people. So, and it's not something that animals do. It's very unique to us. Um, and so, that also just makes me think about the fact that stories don't happen just sitting behind your computer and like, studying and reading all the how-tos and following the tactics and doing all those things. What do you do to kind of keep feeding your life, your inspirational well, um, so that your story keeps evolving and not just in a one layered way?
I think it's from doing. I think if we're always looking for how can I inspire the next output, but we're not actually living life, I think that's where it gets tricky. Like I think a non-marketing example, like I was a yoga teacher for a very long time and I would travel and study and it was core to my life. And then when I started my company, I realized I was showing up to classes to teach when I hadn't even practiced. I hadn't had time to. I hadn't gone to a class myself. And so I dried up because I didn't have anything to give because I wasn't feeding myself this passion. Like I let the passion die. And I think that we get inspired by things while we're doing them, right? Everyone's like, oh, like it's like when I'm showering and processing something, or when I'm on a walk, or when I'm actually in a collaborative session with someone, that's when the cool stuff happens. And if we sit down and we haven't done shit all week, and then we're trying to like come up with inspiration for something, inspiration comes from the us acting out our passions in real life.
Yeah.
And so like I'm constantly like I have to curb. I'm like I'm sitting there talking to my partner, and I'm like, "Oh, this would make a great LinkedIn post." I'm like, "You can't do that. Your personal, like I gotta like pull it back." But showing up and living your life and being curious and getting out of this idea of like I need to avoid everything so I don't have like any stress or unpredictability in my life. Like throw yourself into it. Go do crazy stuff, and you're gonna have lots to talk about.
Yeah, I agree, and it's usually, like, the most random things that are the most inspiring and just like, "Oh, I never thought about this from that perspective before." And there are so many things to go do or read about or conversations to have with people that you would normally maybe never have conversations with. So, I do think a lot of it is in the art of yeah, I mean, it's collaboration, it's conversation, it's communication, I think it's very hard to do with yourself,
Mhm.
um, whereas the exchange of conversation, I've always just found it to be such a great catapult to someplace new. That, yeah, you can get there in your own mind through your own processes, but when you sprinkle in the ingredients that other people bring to that conversation, and if you can get into a really good collaborative conversation about something challenging or like, let's try to think about it differently, or, let's try to brainstorm on something, that's where real magic can happen, I think.
I agree. And I always think I'm so smart until I present ideas to my team and they have like 85 things to say. I'm like, okay, it's way better now. Right. Like, but I think as doers, like would say I'm probably addicted to like the crossing things off and getting things done and have really struggled throughout my life to detach my sense of personal value and identity to like what I produce and create, right? Like I'm trying to be better at like just being and not always feeling like I did something. Like thanks mom for those habits. So I think being able to kind of step back from I just have to like have focus time and produce and get these things out the door and allowing more time and space and brain space for that creative flow and hearing other people's ideas and saying like maybe it does take 3 weeks to get done but it's more beautiful and the process is fun. I think respecting the journey as much as the outcome has been a very humbling lesson for me, and I've avoided to, I think, creating extra work because I always like to get ahead of things. And then I'm like, wait a minute, something changed and I actually didn't need to do that after all. So I think the creative process, being open to things rather than having to control the process and the outcome, is difficult, but it makes everything better. The output's better, the creative journey is better, but it's very difficult for people like me to do.
Yeah, how do you balance that, right? Especially with client services, especially with brand, where it's, like the heart and soul, you inevitably get invested. Um, but you're still, running a business and need to get paid for your time and your ideas and what you're bringing to the exchange. And yet that always starts to feel so like dirty, even though it's not. But how do you balance like the passion and the commitment to the relationship and the investment that you start to make in the work and seeing it succeed with the realities of a contract and budgets and all of that boring, cold, lifeless stuff?
This is a great question and something that I think was really relevant to things we were doing this past year. Our whole mantra was why do more in 24? And at first glance, it feels lazy, but we got to this stage where we were trying to innovate more than the client or their business unit needed. And so I think there's a matching energy that needs to happen too, where are we trying to create the next best thing with a brand that's like just not there yet and really just needs these foundational elements? And I think the hard part for me personally within that has been I always want the next stage of growth. I always want the next challenge. And at the same time, I'm a very seasoned brand strategist. And so I can walk into a room and say some 101 stuff to some people and their minds are blown. Right. And so I'm trying
Right.
to lean into that a little bit more where I have the inherent expertise that is still very valuable without it feeling like a personal challenge to myself.
Yeah.
So that's been the balance for me is like, what do they actually need versus what's the 100% I can give? Because sometimes they really truly need 30% because they're not really at that 100% yet. And that's okay. So when you get to that level where you're able to say, all right, this client's here and this client's here, and you're matching energy, then you're building together and that friction and rub starts to go away of like, I'm trying to drag them up a hill, right?
Yeah. I mean, you've always been on the agency side, right? Have you ever been in-house?
Yeah, my first agency was 2010. So everything I did before that was in house.
Okay.
In a variety of industries. But I've been, so that's, 15 years I've been agency side, a long time.
Yeah, but a lot of the people that you talk to are and clients, right? They're in-house. So they're working for under the umbrella of a brand or a company on the same things, kind of different viewpoint altogether. Um, how valuable do you think it is to have for the people who are in-house to have that outsider perspective where you're not contaminated by the years of process and politics and bureaucracy and, failures or whatever. You get to come in and maybe infuse a little bit of that excitement.
And I think it depends. I think some brands have invested really well in in-house, right? A great example is Bowl and Branch, the sheet, the linen company. They have
Yeah.
invested from day one. Everything that they've done has been in-house. And so I don't, who am I to say, hey, you should invest money in an outside perspective if what they're doing is working? And I think, there's a rise of like fractional marketers coming up too, where they can kind of pop in and out. I think where we've been able to add the most value across industries is something that we see happening with like a CPG client is completely inaccessible to someone who's in like pharmaceutical, but there still might be tactics and strategies that we can pull just from our experience with that to try something new in a different industry. And I think there are agencies that are very industry specific. And then there are, of course, in house teams that are going to like industry trade shows and reading industry publications. And sometimes I think it can be difficult to look outside and know what's even in the toolbox that would have some sort of a practical application to
Yeah.
what you're doing. Right. So I think it depends. It depends on the need.
Yeah, I think about that a lot because, you know, with Adeo, we've got such an interesting cross section of clients, you know, from elected officials like the governor to now higher eds again to cannabis, right? To like totally emerging brand new markets that aren't even federally legal. Uh, but it's fascinating because, you know, having spent 20 years in a very traditional sort of insulated market like higher ed, which I did in my past, I knew that, you know, the last thing I wanted to do was kind of get sucked down into that sort of just it's just like a whirlpool, you know. It's just like gravity. Um, you need to be able to escape it sometimes if you want to innovate or go new places. And some industries are so insulated and so self-reflecting, and they don't get exposed to a lot of cross industries. I've always found that, you know, and there's always the argument about agencies and whether they should be generalists or whether they should be specialized, and um, that argument changes all the time. And I think there's different cases when it's accurate to say one versus the other is better. Um, but I find that I'm going to learn more and have more opportunity for real traction or real momentum if I'm not pulling from the same bucket of stuff, you know? It's just to me like a no-brainer. You can't just keep going back to the same bucket in life and in work.
When it goes back to the yoga example, right? It's like
Right.
if you start like, I'm just been eating potatoes for a week and you're asking me to like whip up an amazing meal. I'm uninspired right now. And I don't, I just, you have to find, I think, a richness. And to me, it comes down to like life philosophy. Frankly, I think if you're not the type of person who sees this as finite and sees opportunity to learn and grow and experience collaboration with other people in any capacity, I think it's very difficult to show up and do it at work. So I think just being able to have a mind of curiosity, which you have to humble yourself and like really recognize, which gets existential, that like we know the more you know, the less you realize you know, right? Like we have no
Right.
idea why we're on this rando rock spinning and God knows what. So I think the more you can have a sort of like a lust for life, right? And an excitement about like what tomorrow could bring and what the universe could have for you, I think you can really get stuck and stagnant. And as we've learned, the older we get, the more our neural pathways are like, building walls. And I'm just really trying to make sure that doesn't happen because you almost get frozen in this moment of perspective, right, of your life. So I
Yeah.
think having more to draw on for sure, but I don't think that's impossible if you are niched in an industry. It's just where are you going to feed yourself?
Yeah. Where do you think you can kind of look? How does somebody find that path? How does somebody, how does someone start to know, like, okay, well, I know I want to get outside of um, my habits here. I don't want to stagnate. I don't want to go to the same conventions and read the same articles and just be so, singularly focused. Where can you start to like get some inkling of what might be those little sources of inspiration?
It's tough because our algorithms are designed to keep us in bubbles, right? I don't know what others should do. I can say what I do. I mean, I just had dinner with a dear friend on Friday, and I was like, "Where do you go? Like when you're not working, like where do you go hang out? Like what conferences are you going to?" And really listening to what other people are doing. I'm a big believer that you attract more than like pursuing things, because it's
Mhm.
really difficult to connect those dots moving forward. So I think even going back to being more vocal with your own stuff and seeing what comes your way can be incredibly important, because you'll start to attract people who have similar sort of perspectives on an ethos level and be able to open doors for you. I like to find things that feel I'll notice when I start getting too comfortable, or my cousin who's on Life 360 with me, she's like, "Hi, you haven't left your house in 3 days. Go for a walk," right? So yeah, I have those moments where I recognize I'm getting into those patterns of not feeding, and I do think we all need them. And I'll find something that maybe is like a little left of comfort for me, or call up an old friend and do something and just listen. So I think it's just around being open to new opportunities when they come up, and like saying yes to new things. And some people are more introverted like me and just want to read new things, and others can actually go out and socialize and come home with 3 or 4 new ideas. But I mean, if you're in content marketing, why not go to social media week? Like if you see a conference coming up that has people with different perspectives that's adjacent to your work, like why not ask your boss for a little budget and go check it out and network? So I think that there's ways to put yourself outside of your comfort zone and just be open to whatever feast awaits you.
Yeah, I think that's such great advice. It really is, just about say yes to the universe, you know? Say yes to opening the door and walking through it, or opening the book, or signing up for the free whatever it might be, and just participating. And it's like going to the gym, like, the hardest part is going.
Mm-hmm.
It's not doing the work. So it's just opening the door and saying yes. And, so many times, even, like, scheduling these podcasts, there are certain people that, really, like, they want a structure, they want a format, like, what are we gonna talk about? What am I supposed to say? And I'm like, "Who knows?" That's what it is. It's the journey, it's the conversation, that's what we're doing. And that is not something that we are really trained at in life, but that is life.
And we've gotten where everything needs to be planned too, right? Like I just remember growing up, my mom's friends would just come by, like knock, knock and come hang out. And I texted another Tracy friend of mine the other day, and I was like, hey, like, is any chance like you're randomly open for dinner tonight? And her kid was sick and she couldn't. And I said, I hate planning things in advance because I don't know what mood I'm going to be in. And then the day comes, I want to do something and I don't have plan, and I can't reconcile this in my weird mind. So I was like, I told her, I said, I'm going to start asking spontaneously when I want to do stuff. And if you're okay with that, I'm totally okay if you say no every single time. She's like, deal, let's do it. Because I'm just tired of this. Like, you can't really plan things that feel uncomfortable in advance sometimes, because life just, especially as a founder, right? Like life just lifes, and sometimes you need to collapse, or sometimes a client comes up and it's really difficult to do that. And I think we've kind of lost this spontaneity of, like, speaking of universe, following the flow of what you need in that moment versus
Yeah.
trying to anticipate a need 2 weeks in advance because we're all busy. Just I'm over it. I just want to show up in the moment for the thing that I need. And if I get there and I don't really want it anymore, I can always go home.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So much of, life has, gone virtual since the pandemic, and there are a lot of great things about it. And I love my home office studio and all of that. But when I get a chance to start working with a client, I get so excited about seeing, even if it is travel, even if it's like awful travel. I'm so excited about the idea of, like, ooh, I get to get out there in the world and go see these people, and, like, oh, maybe they want to come, see me, and we can do something fun here. Like, it's you just you cannot underestimate the value in those kind of increasingly disruptive activities for getting you out of your comfort zone, getting you in different rooms and spaces. I mean, I think that, they always say that travel is so good for your brain and growth, right? Because you're forced into forming new neural patterns. You're trying to navigate a place you've never been before. All of that newness is just like miracle grow for your brain and your spirit. And I know you're a big travel fan as well. But I always think of, the best thing about having clients all over the country instead of just, down the street or on the Zoom, is that you get a chance to get out and really squeeze that orange for all of its juice when it comes to just change.
Agreed. And you get to plan cute outfits and be in person and all
Find the
that.
good restaurants you're gonna go to, right? Yeah.
Oh, like, nobody's seen my pants in like 5 years, and they're still here. I was like, I refuse to get rid of all of my cute things. But, like, sometimes it's a whole look, it's not just a chest up thing. But I agree, and I
Yeah.
think you'd asked earlier, like, ways to get out of it. Like, if you have the luxury of being able to travel, and I have friends that I've been meaning to see in London forever. I don't have a plan. I just like booked a ticket last week and I was like, these are the dates I'm going and I'll figure it out and work my work life around it. And we are fortunate, right, to be able to work from anywhere. So it's nice to be able to pick up and go. But man, is it hard sometimes when you're just like, but my home's cozy and all of my things are here. And I just want to use one brain cell every morning. But forcing yourself to get out. And I think you're like me too. We both like to solo travel.
Yeah.
So it's like you really got to like get that cortisol up and get through the airport, and it's exhausting.
It is. It is. Although, I mean, I just did a recent bout of train travel, and that is so nice. Just so easy. Just get on the train, and you can just get into a book, or you can work, or you can do whatever, and beats the crap out of driving. And I definitely just find that my brain goes to different places when I've changed my physical space. And to me, it's just an easy hack to get things
Mhm.
flowing in ways that are always beneficial.
I agree. Long live the Acela. It's just the best way to like get us in there. And everyone working on my team right now is along the Northeast corridor. And I'm like, this is amazing. I don't have to fly anybody anymore. You're all right here on the Northeast regional line.
Right? That is nice. It's nice. So tell me about a recent, like, tell me about a recent, you don't have to name names, but like whether it was a client or it could have been internal, but where did you find that the way that you thought it was gonna go was just absolutely not gonna work, and you had to really make a hard left or blow things up to come to a new place?
Yeah, I think it's a very small blow up explosion on this one, but we do a lot of one to one consulting for personal brands, right? So imagine we work with startups, right? And have worked with some of the same startups from like 2016, 2017, who have like now gotten acquired or are acquiring other companies or going through any kind of like capital event. And so we are then getting them into the social selling space because they're like, what's next, right? Or one of the clients we have was a lead that came through my personal LinkedIn 2 years ago, and they really want to have like employee personal brand programs as part of their social selling initiative. So we do this like one to one and like create content in the very traditional like social media way and do the ghostwriting. And we have this client who's wanted to do this for such a long time, and it's like hurting cats internally and like it's eating up her budget. And so we were like, what if instead of us like doing all of the work, we turn this into like a curriculum and like actually built an ongoing workshop where whoever wants to participate can apply internally. And then they come in and we onboard them and we guide them and teach them. And so it was a really interesting process because we just love this client. She's an absolute joy and one of our favorite people to work with. So we're always like, how we just want to help her and see her do well, right?
Right.
But being able to come up with a solution together felt like, I mean, it's a lot less work for us and really sets her up for success and creating something that she now can say, like, this is a program that I built in the organization with
Yeah,
our
and they can onboard new people and yeah.
correct. So it's like our concern was, I was like, well, when our work stops, this program will stop, right? So like
Yeah.
we want to make sure like if our work stops, you're good and like have something. And that feels better. I think if you have a mentality of just like wanting the sales for the sales, which is that old agency model, right? Sales was
Yeah.
disconnected from the people who are dealing with the clients. It's a different mindset of like knowing the next thing's always going to come and going, how can we actually like help you? And now we have this really cool program we can sell to other clients. It's like not as much work for us.
Well, that is really interesting. I know you're a lot, you've got your finger on the pulse around influencer marketing and individual brand voice and all of that. Um, I was just talking with some clients and some colleagues specifically about higher ed, right? And they're so stuck behind these institutional brands and horrible taglines and websites that are so massive and expensive that it's just like this huge, massive thing to even consider ever changing or innovating around. But the reality is that most of their prospective audiences, right? Like most prospective students aren't looking at any of that stuff. They're not going there. They're looking for those brand ambassadors, for lack of a better word, right? Or the influencers. Like my niece, literally, the biggest piece of marketing for UVA in her mind, the most successful piece was some video, some YouTube video that some student made about like how many cappuccinos she stopped and got in during the course of one day at UVA. And my niece loved that. And she's like, I can see myself, like, I can belong to that. That is something that I'm curious about that gave me a sense of the vibe of the place, the authentic story of the place through the eyes of, what makes a place, which is the people who are there. Um, how do you think that big brands are starting to shift to embrace this very real and potent way of reaching people?
What we're seeing is a lot more brands investing in not only their founder and executive leadership having personal brands, which is a lot of the work we're doing these days, but also that of their employees. So we have several clients right now that we are doing employee wide internal personal brand programs that they can start to leverage their expertise. And the function behind it is anything from we want to build a lead pipeline, right? There are SDRs and we want them to be more prominent. And another one could be we want to like better show our expanded capabilities after all of these acquisitions. And so we want the experts within our team to be able to talk about that. We also have them saying we want to build cultural programs, and this makes people feel like they're invested in as individuals. I think it was BlackRock, don't quote me, but I think it was BlackRock who said that they were investing in an 84,000 person employee brand program because that's how many employees they have. And they did it for anybody who wanted to participate. And I think historically, leaders of these organizations have wanted to control employees in any way possible. I don't want you to leave. I don't want you talking about your salary with anyone else. Like, right, like just kind of
Right.
stay in your little lane. And I think the really smart strategic leaders know that having personal brands for your employees is going to help your entire organization. And if they leave, it's okay, right? Like your business
Right.
is not going to fail because two employees who built pipeline on their LinkedIn left. And
Right.
it's the need to take care of people internally is more important than ever because people are talking, and strategic leaders put people first and invest in them and help them to elevate their personal brand. And then obviously a symptom of that is the overall corporate brand rises as well.
Yeah, I was talking to someone recently about the fact that the Ravens, Baltimore Ravens, have a seamstress. And this role is really fascinating, right? Because apparently, like, she was telling my friend that um, Lamar has a lot of problems in the cold weather keeping his hands warm, and so they've been trying to innovate all these different things to put into his pockets in the front of his jersey, went from hand warmers to gloves that he can slide his fingers into to combinations. And I was thinking, I never even would have thought that a football team would have a seamstress, let alone like how much is hanging on that expert's, ability to be creative and innovate and know their team and know these players. And, you it's like, wow, the Super Bowl could hang on the talents of a seamstress. That's a really fascinating story. And I think that is about surfacing these very unique roles of these experts that are hidden away within every single company or organization or institution that are so fascinating, and yet we just bury it under this, just bland, homogenized, like marketing speak, you know?
You're right. And I think there's this wonderful book called Cognitive Surplus that I recommend. It's a little older, but they talk about, after the Industrial Revolution and things started to get, machines came into play. there was this cognitive surplus, right? Because people just had more time. And then came the advent and the rise of television, right? To fill that time. And it also solved this like really big issue of loneliness, right? And a lot of times, like, so many people will rewatch The Office or, Breaking Bad or whatever, like kind of background noise TV show, not because it's entertaining or they're learning something new, but because it removes this layer of loneliness, right? Because you start to feel connected with characters. Then, of course, all this stuff happens with social media and TV kind of like goes down. Now we're seeing the rise of that need for TV more, right? With the creator economy, people are doing more episodic content, right? Or like how many cappuccinos did I have a day? Like wanting to have that connection with a person in the video, like that hasn't left. So there's a girl, her name's Reagan. I forget her last name. If you haven't seen her on Instagram, like 2, 3 weeks ago, she launched her Instagram account. Last I looked, it had 230,000 followers on it. And her whole thing is day one of me rebuilding my life after a horrible breakup. And like, I watched the first one and I'm like, I gotta know how this goes, right? So we're starting to see these like series come back, whether it's like professional, like a day in the life of people at work, or something as, silly as a big breakup and I had to move back with my parents at 27. So I think it's really interesting just the psychology around like how media changes, but also starts to repeat itself because it's so scattered now. And I'm
Yeah.
sure you've seen like on Instagram, you'll see somebody like day one of me redoing my bathroom and like follow for part two. And now you have to kind of follow along. Like we like that. It gives us something to look forward to. It's the same reason I like reading trilogies because I'll finish a book and I miss the characters like they were my friends, right? And I'm like, now I have another one to go back to. Some sort of like connection that we feel with this type of content.
Yeah, and it's gotten so chunked up and so fragmented that I do sense, there is this desire for the longer form story, the more invested relationship.
I'm not buying this whole idea that our attention spans are shorter. That's bullshit, and there's no research to support it. We love long content if it's good.
Yeah, if it's good and if we know how to read, if it's a book. I do worry about the reading, but
Did you watch the whole Risa Tisa on TikTok when that was trending?
no.
I listened to it like a podcast. It ended up in like 87 different episodes, I think she did. And I feel like everyone for a week was just like, Risa Tisa, what's happening with this? And it was so unscripted and raw, but you want that continued story. Like you want something. I wonder too, there's got to be studies coming out eventually about this. Like, have we had that fragmented short form so long that our brains are just exhausted and like, stop the code switching, give me one story to invest in for a while?
Yeah, and there's so many channels. Like, where do you tune in and how do you not get distracted and then, like, go chase the next shiny object? So I do think there's there's a challenge here, um, and I don't know how much loyalty there is or what it takes for someone to say, "Okay, I'm gonna stay and commit to keep watching this." It's been interesting watching the kids and what they get into and what they wanna watch, which is all YouTube, right? That's all they wanna be on is watching YouTube, and they wanna watch the shorts. But every now and then, I'll see them get really into a show with episodes, and it's like, they don't do that if I don't keep them off of YouTube sometimes though too? So I'm like, how much of this do I need to help, nurture? And if I don't, it's like the sugar. I feel like the shorts and the reels and all of that are just, sugar and empty calories. Whereas at least some of the longer narrative stuff, I don't know, it's like your brain has to work a little harder. You've gotta form attachments and have opinions and get invested.
Yeah, you get to go a little deeper, right?
Yeah,
But there is a
yeah,
market for that mediocrity. There is a market for the sugar, right? And we all have it. It's like sometimes you just want the junky thing because you've been thinking a lot that day and you want to, have the ability to just sort of autopilot your brain. And I do think there's a role for
yeah,
it, for sure. And sometimes, I get a little spirally in my head and I need that distraction of like, whether it's a book or just crusty reality TV show just to get my mind off of whatever's happening.
absolutely. That escapism is valuable too. I know that, um my mom's boyfriend turned me on to the guy Rockstar who does all the voiceovers for the mostly dogs, but, some other animals
I
as
don't
well.
know this one.
It's like, it's Rockstar, but X's in place of the, vowels.
Mm.
And what's great well, first of all, he's just brilliant at his voiceovers and the way he uses like, if he's doing a voice for a dog and he'll be like, "Hey, what's going on?" But then the dog runs, so he'll move his voice, so it sounds further away, and so just really good matchup of, like, his spatial understanding of volume. But anyway, they're hysterical, and it just feels so good to laugh at dumb stuff sometimes, especially when everything is so heavy and, like, mind warping between, what is reality and what's happening to our planet, and do we even know what this is?
It's all made up. It's all a simulation. None of this,
Simulation, yeah.
like, this is all as shit's made up. I'm just showing up and pretending like my little jobby job matters every morning.
Like the cat just typing away on
Oh,
the computer.
I don't have those moments where I tell my partner, I'm like, we all just like wake up in the morning and we like eat things and we get in our little car boxes and go places and no one's questioning any of this stuff. I'm like,
Right?
why are we all doing this?
Right? Yeah. No, I mean, I'll throw this in there for anybody who listens because I just share this with everyone right now. The recent thing to absolutely blow my mind was a podcast called The Telepathy Tapes, which is all about how they are this woman and her crew are bringing to light something that's been long known and long documented, but not talked about, like lose your license to teach or practice or be a scientist if you even bring it up, that nonverbal or mostly nonverbal autistic kids have telepathic powers. Unquestionable, proven, documented, and the rabbit hole that she goes down on this podcast is fantastic and beautiful and amazing. And yeah, at the end of it, you're like, oh yeah, we know very little of what is actually here.
That's what I need to listen to on my walk.
Yes, give
Fascinating.
it a listen. Give it a listen, and then we'll do a whole podcast about the podcast. Talk.
Exactly. Yes,
Maybe
it's
we'll get meta.
love it.
Oh man, well listen, thanks for joining me and talking about everything, whatever came up. And I wish you much success on whatever 2025's motto is going to be. What 2024? Why do more? What's 2025?
I think we're thinking about it's the year of the career. So I think it's like last year was about stripping away all the bullshit, and now it's about stepping into that power and having it be very easy and accepting what comes in.
Well, I love everything that you're doing about the individual, and the voice and the empowering these individual brands within the big brands. It just seems like that's so exciting and necessary and such a fertile place to be and work. So I wish you much success in that and all of your ventures. And I'm sure we'll talk again soon. But thank you for being here and for sharing.
A pleasure. Thank you for having me on.